Welcome in, Dween Nation. This is your host, Justin Paez, alongside Genoa Agudelo. And hopefully you just tuned in. We just had our running backs and tight ends episode. And we're like, hey, let's knock out the second one. We're going to split into two so it's easier for you guys. This one's going to be wide receivers and quarterbacks. So I'm very excited to get into it. Genoa, how you doing today?
Yo, Dween Nation. This is the second part, man. This is so exciting, man. Quarterbacks and wide receivers, Justin. It's been very interesting, really. Some key moves that really makes an impact on fantasy football. And it makes, Justin, an impact on how we draft this year, Justin. No doubt. A lot of players are boosted now through the quarterbacks or the wide receivers. So this is very interesting, Justin. I'm so excited to dive into this, man. I can't wait to hear your takes on these because, man, a lot of crazy things happen in free agency through the quarterbacks and through the wide receivers, man. And I'm excited to find out and see which move is your favorite. And you know, man, let's get into this, man. Let's get into it.
And I kind of want to dive in right to the biggest news that came out today, or I guess yesterday by the time most of you guys are going to listen to this. Mike Williams, obviously we're going to get into the whole Chargers debacle. Obviously he got cut because of money reasons. He was they saved $20 million on him. He gets cut, and now today he signs with the New York Jets, and that is just phenomenal. I couldn't have asked for a better spot for this guy. There were talks with Pittsburgh, which would have been fine. But the fact that the Jets really don't have a number 2 wide receiver that is going to be impactful. I know they had Lazard, but Mike Williams is way better than him in my opinion. And Aaron Rodgers needed another weapon, and they get that. They signed 1 year, a somewhat prove it 1 for 15 deal with Mike Williams. So yeah, what are your thoughts, Mike Williams?
Yeah, I love it, Justin. If he can stay healthy, he is a ball hawk. He is one of those Mike Evans types receivers, one-on-one. He is going to snatch it. He's very tall, very big guy, explosive. You know, he did tear his ACL earlier in the season, Justin. So I do like him to be ready to go for a training camp. And now, Justin, he is a wide receiver that's paired up with Garrett Wilson, who had a pretty good year for the Jets, a team that didn't have their star quarterback, Aaron Rodgers, at all, but 5 plays of the season. So I love Mike Williams going this year. You know, my only knock on Mike Williams is he can hardly ever stay healthy. But when he is healthy, Justin, he puts up great wide receiver 1 and 2 numbers. And hey, if he is healthy all year, he's going to be a league winner for sure. He's going to be a guy that when Aaron Rodgers can't get the ball to Garrett Wilson, he's going to be able to get the ball to Mike Williams, who, you know, Mike Williams was with a older Keenan Allen. Now he's paired up with a young Garrett Wilson going into his 3rd year. Not only that, you do have Breece Hall in the backfield. So this Jets offense immediately gets way more interesting with Aaron Rodgers coming back. To grade it, I'm gonna give it a B. I'm gonna give it a B just because, you know, Mike Williams, he just, you know, he's coming back from his ACL injury. He did tear it very early in the season. So like I said, I do think he'll be back. You know, he'll be back for training camp in July, August area. I don't think he'll practice much, but I do have him being ready to go in week 1.
Yeah. I agree that the ACL might leave you, at least as a fantasy manager, a little skeptical on how good of a season he can really have. But for the Jets, I think it's really great. And I know he's viewed as just a 50-50 ball guy, but he played some slot, not this past year, but the year before. So he's got more skills than I think most people might think. And when he is on the field, he's phenomenal. So I like it a lot. So yeah, all right, moving on to the next guy because we're already diving right in here. We're gonna talk about his old buddy, which has really started to has dried out now. The Chargers receiving room. They asked Keenan Allen for a pay cut. He said, "Nope, I just had the best season of my career," and he gets shipped off to be what looks to be Caleb Williams' next future number 1 or number 2 wide receiver. Keenan Allen is a Chicago Bear. I'm going to defer to you. Let me get your thoughts on that first.
Yeah, pretty risky trade for Chicago. I don't think they had to give up enough, but you got to think about it this way now. They're going to have Caleb Williams there at quarterback. This guy is a Patrick Mahomes-esque quarterback, not as far as winning, but as far as talent. This guy is a gunslinger. He's a pass-heavy quarterback. He's not the guy that's always going to look to run the ball. This guy's going to want to run it and gun it, throw it down the field, you know, air it out 30 to 40 yards all over the, you know, whether they're down, they're up. You know, and Chicago is trending the right way, Justin. They have a deep threat in DJ Moore, who they got last year. And now they have a veteran presence in Keenan Allen, which eases the pressure for him. We talked about DeAndre Swift being in the backfield in last episode. So, I like Keenan Allen. I do think he has a couple more years in under his belt. He had a great year in Los Angeles until, Justin Herbert got hurt, and then he got hurt, and they both of them could not finish the season together. If he were able to finish the season with Justin Herbert, I do believe he would be up there with Tyreek Hill and CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown as far as numbers and stats. I'm going to grade it. I'm going to give it a B plus just because of Keenan Allen's his age and his wear and tear. I feel like if Keenan Allen was the same age as like A.J. Brown, I would give it like an A minus or even like an A plus. Chicago is still a shaky place to play. The field is never really good. The stadium is as bad as Washington or MetLife Stadium in Jersey. So it's not really an attractive game field to play in. That home field in Soldier Field. But I do like it. As far as fantasy, Justin, I feel like he's gonna go a little bit where Mike Evans went last year, as far as like round 5, like round 6. I don't think he goes round 4 because I don't really think he went that early when he was in the Chargers. But I do like Keenan Allen to be a great, if he's healthy, I do think him and and Caleb Williams are able to build, that chemistry. And it's not just going to be him. DJ Moore is going to be great. So look, things are looking good for Chicago. I like Keenan Allen. It's a great trade. I would have made it if I was the Bears. I don't think I would have done it though if I was the Chargers. I don't think I would have got rid of him. But the Bears are trending in the right direction, and Keenan Allen is gonna be an impact, and he's gonna be a factor in Chicago.
Yeah, I like everything that you said, and I think it's important to point out that I wouldn't have made the call if I was the Chargers. I know they're trying to get out of cap hell, if you want to say. They owe a lot of big stars a lot of money, and they're all getting older. But they decided to keep Mack and Bosa to help the defense and get rid of their 2 top wide receivers. For fantasy, Keenan Allen is going to fall off a little bit, most definitely. I mean, he was the wide receiver 8 this past season. And, I mean, he was the number 1 receiver for Justin Herbert. Even though we didn't like the coaching, he was essentially on that offense alone for the back half of the season with Mike Williams injured. So it's not going to be like that at all. He gets a rookie quarterback, even though it's the number 1 overall pick. It's still a rookie quarterback. And I think DJ Moore, he's the younger, fresher wide receiver. I think Moore's going to assume the number 1 wide receiver role, which just means less targets, I think, for Allen. So he definitely falls into a 5th or 6th round guy, which you would think if he had stayed in LA, he could have been a 3rd rounder. So it's definitely a different year for Keenan. And Chicago always kind of seems to have a little stink on them. I'm fine with it though. I actually didn't give my Mike Williams grade. I give that Williams one probably a higher grade just because he's younger and they needed it. I guess Chicago also needed it, but I'm just more excited with Aaron Rodgers. I'll give a B plus to Mike Williams in this one. I'm gonna go with a B plus as well because Keenan Allen showed that he still has it. But yeah, cool. Moving from Keenan Allen, let's dive into, to me, the best fantasy for the singular player, the best way he could have gone. Hollywood Brown leaves Arizona to now could assume the wide receiver 1 spot for the Kansas City Chiefs. I was very happy to see that. I always love when a player signs with a team that's going to boost their fantasy numbers, and he signed with them for less than he could have got elsewhere. He wants to win a ring. He wants to play with Mahomes, which who doesn't? And he's set up to be I think he's a very good wide receiver. So I give it an A. He's right up my alley. I pick him over guys like Keenan Allen and Mike Williams that we just talked about. Just because he can get volume like Keenan Allen can, but now he's got Mahomes. So yeah, what are your thoughts with Hollywood Brown?
Justin, I absolutely love this move, and this is underratedly one of the best moves at wide receiver that any team has done this year. When you look at this offense now in other episodes when we talked about Kansas City, we've always said yes, they won. I've said yes, they've won the Super Bowl back-to-back years. But what does Mahomes want now? He doesn't want to struggle during the year. He wants everything to be as best as it can for him. He struggled with his receivers On Christmas Day, he had a terrible game against, the Vegas Raiders where he could not complete a pass to anybody. And I feel like it was a lack of talent. But look at this now, Justin. The reigning Super Bowl champions now have a Hall of Fame tight, well, they've been having a Hall of Fame tight end, Travis Kelce. They discovered a gem at the draft, the Rashee Rice, who did pretty good, really great this year. And you pair him up with Hollywood Brown, who's a deep threat, who's been great anywhere he went. Obviously Hollywood gets a little bit. People look down on him just because of this past season. Now he did pretty good. A lot of people didn't pay attention to Hollywood, but you got to remember he played half the season with Joshua Dobbs. He had a game with like Tooney, I think it was, the backup quarterback, the third string. And then when Kyler Murray came back, it was sort of tough to get into the groove. Kyler Murray had just came back from ACL. He did have a couple of games with them. And they had gotten rid of Hopkins, so it was just, Hollywood there. And so now Hollywood gets a quarterback who can make any throw in any position. And Hollywood's going to be that guy. If Hollywood was great, Justin, with Lamar Jackson, could you imagine how he's going to be with Patrick Mahomes throwing him to the football? And oh wait, he has Hall of Fame tied in on as a teammate, and he has Andy Reid calling plays. I mean, there could be things for Hollywood as like not just of course receiving, but I'm going to go on the limb and say that maybe Hollywood has some rushing touchdowns, Justin. I mean, this is a guy that's going to get volume on all over the field, on all cylinders of the field. They got rid of Marquez Valdes-Scantling, so now he falls into that slot guy. And things are going to get very interesting, Justin. As far as drafting, I want to get your take on this, though. Now, you did mention where he could possibly go, but let's get specific here. Now, let's break it down. Look, Hollywood is playing with the best quarterback in the league and one of the most interesting, creative offenses. So that's going to open up a lot of things for fantasy. Justin, I don't want to say he goes in the third round or fourth, but do you think he slips past the fourth round in fantasy drafts? Because I think he could go third, but I definitely think he goes fourth. What do you think?
Yeah, I like fourth, and it's kind of like, okay, let's think about the other guys that could go around that area. Maybe a Mike Evans, maybe a DJ Moore. I'm trying to think. Maybe Tank might go. Tank might go right around there. Tank Dell.
What about Rashee Rice? Where does he go? Do you pick Hollywood or?
That's the tough question right there. And I think heading into draft season, it's going to be similar to how we talked about Tony Pollard in the last episode with Tajay.
Yeah.
I think I might go the wide receiver that is cheaper at the end of the day, because I think they're 1A, 1B. I don't think one guy's going to outshine too much the other. So if Rashee Rice, for example, is going in the fifth and Marquise falls to the sixth or seventh, I'm going that way, or if it's vice versa. So
yeah,
I like both guys. I feel like Mahomes can dish it out anywhere he wants to now, and it's not going to be fumbly Kadarius Toney where he can't catch the ball, or Sky Moore or MVS. He's got capable wide receivers. I mean, at the end of the day, this really helps Mahomes. This jumps his stock up. I had him down at quarterback 6 or 7 just because the defense was playing really well and he didn't have wide receivers. Now he's got a good cast of weapons with him, and he jumps right back up there in the top 3 to 4 QB conversation. But yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I said A, so I'm happy with it. We're both happy with it.
Yeah,
it helps
absolutely.
just about all the parties. Don't think, oh, Kelsey's going to get less now, or oh, Rice is irrelevant now. It's not true. Mahomes can give it to everyone that he wants to. So I like it. And we were waiting for that Chiefs, somebody to join and get that, Chiefs value that, we were thinking maybe T. Higgins earlier on, or Hopkins last year when he was a free agent. So it's Hollywood. Hollywood's the answer there, and we like it. So I think he's better than Juju, and Juju had a good year when he was there. So yeah. So yeah. Okay, moving past Hollywood, I actually want to talk about someone that I'm most excited for, and it's not a homer pick, okay? But we were thinking, hey, and this could change. This is subject to change to the draft, but the Texans re-signed Noah Brown. And you might think, why are you talking about it so early? Like, there's a couple other names that you might like more. I think that'd be a short-sighted take. I think Noah Brown as the wide receiver 3 with CJ Stroud could be a good value. And we saw it in games. I know, Brown shined in games where Nico was out or Tank was out, but he shined. He really did. He had massive games. I'll let you talk and give me your thoughts on Noah Brown while I look up something about him.
Well, I don't love it all the way. I do think my Houston Texans got to go into the draft. Probably pick another guy. Noah Brown is to me a wide receiver 4. I do think he can have some great games. He had a great game against Tampa. I think he had another one in Cincinnati where he was very reliable for the Texans, but towards the end of the year he had an injury that nagged on, and it was pretty much a no factor for my Texans. When you do have Tank coming back from a pretty nasty injury, Nico, who's now our number 1 wide receiver. Noah Brown could be a guy that we can possibly save towards the end of the year. I feel like with the Texans, we definitely have to get, I think there's some good wide receivers out there that we can get that could be potentially better than Noah Brown. Justin, I feel like maybe even getting a guy like Tyler Boyd maybe to add to that depth. And I feel like the Texans should get a wide receiver or 2 in the draft, later in the draft. There's some good gems there. And I also feel like a guy like Mechie, I'm not ready to give up on. He was battling, leukemia just a year or 2 ago. It was tough for him to get back into the groove of things. I feel like this year he got to experience, NFL, play and competition. I feel like it was a little tough for him to get on his feet. But now he's had a full year into the NFL. He will have a full training camp going into this year with CJ Stroud, with a more experienced CJ Stroud and a more experienced Bobby Slowick. I'm not ready to give up on Mechie yet. So with Noah Brown, I feel like it's going to be a week-to-week thing. He's going to also fall under my DraftKings, week-to-week FanDuel guy that you can plug and play a fantasy waiver wire for any buys or any potential injuries. So Noah Brown is a pretty decent re-signing for CJ Stroud to elevate that Houston Texans offense more.
I think it's interesting with your take. I mean, if you look at, I was kind of disregarding Hutchinson and Mechie, what they could bring,
Yeah.
and Robert Woods still might be on the team. But with Mechie, you're right. It was only his essentially his rookie year, and he was coming off the leukemia, which is a very commendable thing to get back from.
Yeah.
So if he kind of shows some things that could be different, or if they draft a guy in day 2, or they don't have a day 1 pick anymore. So if they got a guy on day 2, things could change. But as of right now, I am a fan of Noah Brown. I think I look in here that he had 3 good games, so not super special games.
Yeah.
He actually had 2 games with 0. So, but when he had the shot, I guess is what I was looking at, what I was remembering. With Tampa
Yeah.
Bay, he had 29 points. He had 150 and a score, 7 for 172, 8 for 82. So I think I'm looking at, he has the ability to do it. And now if he's healthy, he sticks to being healthy in that offense. It's kind of everybody gets some good stuff if you're playing with CJ Stroud. So
Yeah.
that's where I was at. I give it a B. So yeah, Noah Brown stays in Houston. They didn't sign a wide receiver 3 like most people thought they might, and they
Yeah.
still could address that. But okay, move to the next guy who got the bag, and he's an old, not older. He's 28 or 29 now, but he gets the ultimate bag to go to Tennessee and become probably the number 1 wide receiver on the team for Will Levis. It's Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
Obviously, it was between him returning to Jacksonville and going to Tennessee, and obviously Tennessee offered him more money, which is funny. If you guys watch his press conference coming to Tennessee, he mentions that he kind of wanted to stay in Jacksonville, which is kind of odd. But looking at it this year, he was off and on in Jacksonville with Trevor Lawrence, and I know Jacksonville kind of struggled at times, but it's Trevor Lawrence. I think he's a good quarterback, and now he's going to Tennessee on a worse team, new coach, Will Levis. I don't like it. I like it for him. Congrats on you. You got the bag. Like
Mm-hmm.
all props to you, Calvin, for getting it. But it's been a long time since I was really happy with what you're putting on the field. And so I'm off of it. I give it a C. I don't think he'll be on my draft boards. Like, I mean, obviously he's going to be drafted, but he's not going to be a guy I'm
Yeah.
searching for, just because I think he's going to be very inconsistent. He's going to be super inconsistent. And if Will Levis, turns out to not be, the franchise guy that Tennessee wants him to be, it could be even worse. Obviously, there's a flip side of that, but I think that's less likely than more likely. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on Calvin Ridley to Tennessee?
I'm going to start this off with a little bit of a hot take. I'm going to say Will Levis has not a better, but just as good of an arm as Trevor Lawrence, Justin. Just a
Okay.
little bit. There's a game that lives rent free in my head. It was when the Tennessee Titans wore those Oiler jerseys, trying to be like my Texans, trying to be like
Right.
my Houston Oilers. Here's the thing. There's a game. Will Levis had a great game against the Falcons where I think he threw like 4 touchdowns, had a great quarterback rating near of 100, Justin. And that to me convinced me that Will Levis has somewhat of a future being a starting quarterback for the next year or two for the Titans until they figure out, okay, maybe there's another quarterback out there, that we'll probably find out later this year who's going to be good. So for the time being, Will Levis is no doubt going to be the starter going into week 1. I have no doubts that I'm not really afraid of Malik Willis. So with that being said, I feel like Ridley is going to blossom just a tad bit. Now, you got to look at a couple of things with Ridley. He was suspended during the 22 season.
Yep.
And, this has been a thing historically in the NFL. When you miss a year, whatever, maybe it's tough to get back on your feet because each year the NFL upgrades, it levels up, and it's sometimes tough to catch up to talent. With that being said, yes, Ridley was he was hands down the most on and off receiver. I had him in my main league. He was so unreliable at times, Justin. And I remember when my season was over, he was starting to go off, and I'm like, bro, where was this when I needed it? And so I feel like now, though, really now you got to think about it. He teams up with DeAndre Hopkins, who, yes, DeAndre Hopkins is getting up there in age. This is a good combo. Ridley and Hopkins is going to be pretty good, with a new scheme in Tennessee. And Will Levis, who I'm not saying he's going to be a great quarterback, but once again, Will Levis could fall under my, once again, DraftKings dual week-to-week guy. And Will Levis is going to be very matchup based. Whoever he's playing, if it's on the road, and I feel like Ridley's going to be able to benefit from that. Now, Ridley's going to have now another year. He's going to have a year of playing now, so I feel like he's going to be a little bit more energized. He's going to have more juice to him. He's going to be able to benefit in Tennessee. A guy like Treylon Burks, who's had probably 2 good games in 3 years, could also benefit from that. So when you look at Ridley with Hopkins and Treylon Burks, you got to believe that maybe there's something there in Tennessee. You got to believe that Tennessee now is trending to the right direction. It looks like they're going to want to compete in that division with Houston and Jacksonville, and how tough Indianapolis is going to be, Justin. I like Ridley in the 5th round. I think that if you go 3 or 4, I think you're overdrafting. You're doing too much. I think there's another quarterback. I think there's obviously in the 3rd and 4th round, you definitely got to go a Laporta or definitely a Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews in those rounds before you can think about getting a guy like Ridley's potential. I do like him to be a guy, Justin, that kind of comes on later into the year. Guy that, he's going to struggle the first couple weeks. We're not going to get the best out of Tennessee, but I do think that later in the year, they're going to be that offense that it's a little bit stingy, that makes plays. There could be a game where Hopkins can miss. He's up there in age, so Ridley could be the guy that could step in. So if I were to grade it, I'm going to give it a B- for Tennessee's sake because they need offensive talent. It looked like they were going down. They just lost Derrick Henry, so they're going to need some good players there to draw some attention, draw some value. So I like Ridley in Tennessee. I'm not crazy about it, so I'm going to give it a B.
Yeah, I think that's good. Obviously, he got the money, which means that he's going to be involved. A couple of years ago, when Christian Kirk signed with the Jaguars for all that money, we were like, "That's awful. That's horrendous." And then you look at it and you're like, "Wow, he had a really good season. He's actually a good wide receiver." And they needed to use him because they paid him so much. So this could be the same kind of story written for Ridley. Now, one last thing on it is this year is definitely going to be the test if Will Levis is going to be their franchise. I think we'll know by week 6 or 7, maybe I'll give him a little, maybe week 10. If we are seeing a lot of struggles continue due to maybe the quarterback play, that would hurt, of course, Ridley. But at least that would maybe put a signal to dynasty owners that there's going to be a new quarterback in town. So it's going to go one of 2 ways. I think Tennessee, it's either Will Levis's last year in Tennessee or Will Levis is going to be there for 5 more years. So, that's just that. I know that's more Will Levis, but it affects Ridley for his time there. So, that's for Calvin Ridley. Now let's move it to the team he's no longer a part of. They make 2 moves. One of more notability, Gabe Davis leaves Buffalo. He is now a Jacksonville Jaguar. For the team's sake, I don't love it because they kind of downgrade from Calvin Ridley to Gabe Davis, a guy that was also very inconsistent in his time in Buffalo. He had those big performances and then had complete duds. And I think Jacksonville won't be very different. He was the wide receiver 2 in Buffalo. Now he's arguably the wide receiver 3 in Jacksonville with a worse quarterback. I like it less than I like Calvin Ridley, so I'm gonna give it a
Yeah.
D. Like, I'm pretty out on Gabe Davis. They also signed Devin Duvernay, which is irrelevant to me. I mean, he's got the speed, and last year he had some sort of relevance with Baltimore, but I don't know. I just don't think he's that good. But yeah, what are your thoughts on the two signings, particularly Gabe Davis?
Justin, for Jacksonville's sake, I kind of like it. I'm a little bit confused. I do think it would have looked so much better if they kept Ridley and they were able to get Davis and Duvernay with Christian Kirk. I feel like, wow, that's Trevor Lawrence now. His fantasy stock goes up. But now that Ridley's not there, it's a little tough to see who they're going to rely on, because I feel like Christian Kirk was able to benefit so much on this offense last year because Ridley was looked as that number one guy as he was in Atlanta. With Davis, I do feel like, and Duvernay, both these players needed a change of scenery. They're both previous teams. They were very, very underutilized, especially this past year. Everybody remembers Gabe Davis's historic game in Kansas City a couple years ago and that thriller divisional matchup that's so fun to watch on YouTube if you're just bored. I mean, Gabe Davis, after that game, he was, everybody thought he was going to have a great year in 2022 and 2023. He did kind of have a good one in 2022. I think you had him, Justin, a couple years back, and he was decent on and off. But this past year, Justin, he was absolutely disappointing, as every pass catcher was in Buffalo besides the tight ends. So with Gabe Davis, I think it's a solid pickup. He's going to be playing that Jacksonville sun, that Florida heat. So I feel like that eases up things instead of playing in up north in cold Buffalo. And Duvernay, I love Duvernay. He's very dear to my heart, as I am. I love all my Texas Longhorns. I've watched almost every game, and Duvernay was one of those guys that I love to watch. One of my personal favorite Longhorns. He was just very underutilized in Baltimore. They've never been a pass happy team, especially having the MVP quarterback Lamar Jackson. So I do like Duvernay to be a sneakier pick, more like of a Jacoby Myers, maybe like a Mooney breakout type thing for Duvernay. I'm being optimistic here, Justin. So obviously I don't think it'll happen, but I hope it does because I love my Longhorns. If you look at the depth chart, Gabe Davis, Duvernay, to go along with Kirk, I don't love it for Jacksonville's sake. I do think they take a step back now. I think that now Tennessee in that division goes a little bit over them. It's going to be tough to catch the Colts and my Texans. To grade it, I'm going to give it a D, maybe a D minus. But I do think this could be potentially kind of good for Jacksonville. I'm not sure when this breakout will happen, but I think Gabe Davis will have a breakout at some point in the year. I'm not sure it'll be consistent, but I'm not too high on it. And it does lower Trevor Lawrence's stock as well, fantasy-wise.
A little bit. And
Yeah.
I know Davis has somewhat of a touchdown upside. He had, of course, those two big, obviously that game in Kansas City or that game in Pittsburgh, if you remember, he had two long touchdowns, the 199-yard one.
Yeah.
So he has some ability, and maybe a new scenery can change that up. But they still have Evan Ingram. They still have Zay Jones.
Yeah.
Those guys, are going to command some targets. And so I think Gabe Davis will fall into a worse Calvin Ridley role where he'll be kind of inconsistent, but he'll have big games. So yeah, we have our pessimisms and optimisms there, but those Jacksonville receivers are knocked out, and we're going to move to the trade that kind of shocked me pretty. I know we heard the rumors that Diontae might get traded, and he was like, I don't know what he was saying on Twitter, I don't remember, but he gets moved to the Panthers. Carolina Panthers have Diontae Johnson. Bryce Young has his new wide receiver 1 in a trade that I feel like Pittsburgh didn't get enough back on, especially the fact that the Panthers were going to cut Diontae Jackson. And he's just not the player that Diontae is. But Diontae in Carolina, I probably have him in the same realm of where he kind of went going into this past year, maybe an 8th round pick, just because We don't know if Bryce Young's the answer yet for Carolina. We like the hire of Dave Canales, and it's clear that he's going to be the number one guy, the number one wide receiver for the team. But just the fact that they kind of stole the trade, I'm going to give it an A minus. I think I don't know if his fantasy value is going to be super great. Hope if Bryce Young and him start a connection, it could be special.
Yeah.
But that's where I kind of have it at. Where do you have it at?
I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't like the fit. I don't like the fit for Diontae Johnson. I feel like he's more of a guy that needs more of an established quarterback. Now, we're always gonna give the benefit of the doubt to Bryce Young for the next year or so, just because of the situation he was brought into. But Bryce Young does lack a little bit of that gunslinger, pass-heavy type of arm. I feel like Bryce Young wants to be good when he kind of feels like he's out of, that shadow. Bryce Young to me feels like he knows he's good, but does he believe he's good? Can he be that guy that's consistent, that can get the Panthers where they need to be? I do have a little bit of questions of Bryce Young, but I do think he still can be good in this league, still can lead the Panthers to the playoff. It's very 50-50. I just don't think, I would have rather Justin traded for Keenan Allen. I would have rather traded for, a T. Higgins like you were so, high on. I feel like that's a fit for Bryce Young. Diontae Johnson has had some gunslinger quarterbacks. Yeah, he was so good with Big Ben. And, we saw him do something with the quarterbacks after. Kenny Pickett, it lacks a lot of passing. And at times, so did Bryce Young. He needs a little bit more. He was good with Adam Thielen, but then they burnt out and fell off. Diontae Johnson's still a great wide receiver, but does he fit in Carolina? You got to believe that Dave Canales is going to be able to develop it. As far as for the Panthers, I'm going to give it a B minus because Diontae Johnson is still a pretty good receiver. I just don't think Pittsburgh should have traded him. I would have liked to see what he could have been able to do with Russell Wilson or Justin Fields, who I'm excited to get to later in this episode, Justin. But I really feel like Pittsburgh should have just kept him to pair him with Pickens, who's still learning his way around the league.
Mm-hmm.
So B minus for Carolina, but like C minus D plus for Diontae Johnson in his situation. So I think Diontae Johnson and Thielen could coexist, but I'm not really. It doesn't really raise Bryce Young's stock that much. I'm still picking him round 10, 11. Diontae Johnson is a good wide receiver 3 in the 9th round, I would say, Justin.
Yeah, that's about right. I think he'll get the volume because Bryce needs more targets. But I think an interesting point maybe to bring up is that Thielen, through maybe 10 to 12 weeks of the year, maybe closer to 10, he was a top 10 wide receiver. And he obviously was on his last leg, and I know he's still around, but he was getting volume, and he was putting up really good fantasy numbers. And I think at this stage of their careers, Diontae Johnson's a better wide receiver than Thielen is. So if things get better in there and he kind of has a Thielen season, it could be interesting. Obviously, Deontay's never been a touchdown wide receiver guy, which that's what Thielen's bread and butter was last year. That's what made him very intriguing, of course, volume as well. But if Deontay's not getting the touchdowns, which we haven't seen him really do, it could hurt him too. So, yeah, moving past that. All right, we have kind of like a set of wide receivers that I want to knock out, and then we'll jump into quarterbacks. All right, so it's going to be based off of 3 teams. So Buffalo, they signed 2 wide receivers that are of note, at least. Atlanta, of course, did, and Philadelphia did. So I'm going to start with the two twos. We got Buffalo. They signed Curtis Samuel, and they signed Mack Hollins.
Yeah.
All right, and then actually we'll stick with that. Buffalo, give me your thoughts on the 2 signees.
Yeah, I like it. Curtis Samuel is an upgrade to Gabe Davis. I feel like it's a steal. Justin, if he can stay healthy, he's going to be good. Mack Hollins, he's been around the league. He's had flashes of being a pretty good wide receiver 2 to 3. I kind of liked him in Miami a few years ago, and then he goes to Vegas, who's pretty good, but then gets replaced by Jacoby Myers, who had a great season as well. And so Mack Hollins, he's a very dependable guy, very, very underrated, Justin. He was on your Eagles when they won the Super Bowl. I think he was a rookie that year. Yeah, fun fact, he was on that team. I don't think he got much snaps, but he had a couple good flashes. Justin, Mack Hollins was there. So I feel like he can be a guy that, a solid guy, that guy that could replace Gabe Davis just because of his structure. Matt Collins is more built like a solid guy. Curtis Samuel more of a speed guy. Now, if you've watched here at Doing Nation, I'm just very down with Stephon Diggs. If he can return Justin to a wide receiver one, Curtis Samuel and Matt Collins, with Shakir, if he's there still, Justin, and those two tight ends, Buffalo's going to have another solid year, a run at that. I think it's the AFC East, right? East.
Yeah.
In that division, it's a very solid run in that offense for Josh Allen, who's still a top 3 quarterback, top 3 to top 5 quarterback. I like it. If I give it a grade, I'm going to give it a B- because I'm still a believer in Curtis Samuel.
Yeah, I think Curtis Samuel's kind of the main takeaway out of this one. I liked him to join maybe Philly or Houston, be that third receiver. Yeah. He gets the opportunity to be the number 2 receiver, and arguably if Stephon Diggs is out, might have to step into a wide receiver 1 role. Now, yeah. I have a good feeling that in the first round they go wide receiver, maybe get into Brian Thomas or an Adonai Mitchell or Xavier Worthy, something like of that essence, which could hurt him a little bit. But I think he'll establish himself as the good slot man, and he actually got. He got carries in Washington too, which they're trying to be interesting like that. They could use that, and he's better than Shakir. I know maybe some people have some hopes for him, but I think Shakir will stay in that wide receiver 4 role for Buffalo. As for Samuel, though, he might be a good sleeper in the 10th or 11th round. I think a lot of people might be sleeping on him just because he's never been kind of the star. So, yeah, that's kind of where I have it. I have him at a B, just because I think Buffalo maybe could have got a bigger name, but, if you get him, you got to do what you got to do. All right. Yeah. Now moving to Atlanta. They signed Darnell Mooney. He leaves Chicago, and he is now the number 2 guy, as what we see beside Drake London. And then they make a trade to get rid of Desmond Ridder, and they bring in Rondale Moore. They're not stars. We saw maybe a flash or two from Darnell Mooney a couple years ago, and then obviously this year was nothing good. And then Rondale too. I just don't think Rondale's a great receiver. He obviously can take a top off a defense. Could be a good special teams guy. So I'm solid on these. I'm gonna give it a C plus. It's not somebody that they're not people that kind of move the needle for me. Obviously their quarterback change makes things a lot more interesting, which we'll talk about very shortly. But yeah, give me your take on the 2 Atlanta wide receivers.
Yeah, I like them. Like you mentioned, they're not, wide receiver ones. At one point, Mooney was a 1 until, a couple things went down. They got DJ Moore, get like a coaching change and stuff like that. So Mooney and Moore, Justin, they make a great addition to Kyle Pitts and Drake London, and we love Bijan Robinson in the backfield. Right. And now that you had Kirk Cousins, Justin, this was a guy who was playing at the highest, the peak of his peak of. We've never seen Kirk Cousins play this well until he got hurt last year. So I feel like Kirk Cousins now is going into an unbelievable situation. And now the Falcons are my favorite to win, that division now. They're going to give Tampa Bay a run for their money. That Saints defense, who's always so tough year in and year out, they're going to struggle with an offense like this, Justin. And, I'm a little confused as to why, the Cardinals got rid of Rondale Moore. Maybe they are going to go Maserati Marv, Justin. But they got rid of, Rondale, and they don't have Marquise Hollywood-Brown anymore. They don't have Hopkins, obviously. He's been in Tennessee. So, we don't really know who. It's just Trey McBride and Kyler Murray, Justin. So, a little confusing. But, hey, for Atlanta's sake, I love it because that depth chart for pass catchers is going to be unbelievable for Kirk Cousins to get the ball to. So, I like it. This is going to be a C+ for me just because I feel like they can really add to the table and have defenses, a little confused whether the Falcons are going to run the ball or, pass the ball. Like I mentioned last episode, Kirk Cousins isn't a top quarterback to get to these pass catchers, and I'll dive in a little bit more to that. But he's a guy that can, work the play action, get it to whoever's open. And, I'm excited to see what the Falcons are going to do, Justin.
Yeah. And so we're aligned there, C+. kind of guy. I like Mooney, of course, more than Rondale. If anybody was
Mhm.
curious on that, and Mooney has he's got a pretty versatile skill set. I'd say he
Yeah,
can be the deep threat, or he can kind of be an intermediary, and of course Rondale also can do both, but kind of at a
yeah.
lesser rate. So yeah,
Mhm.
we're fine with it. Obviously, Drake London is the man of intrigue in that offense at the wide receiver position, but still two good moves. And then the last move of relevance, I think, for wide receivers is we see DeVante Parker, who
Yeah,
he showed, some flashes over the years. Obviously, had that big year in Miami, and then he moved to New England. And it's kind of been meh.
yeah, yeah.
But he signs with Philadelphia, which we were thinking they were definitely going to bring in another wide receiver 3, and I think this is their best wide receiver 3
They've had, yeah,
to date. So I like it. I don't think he'll be a super value. I don't think he'll be drafted in fantasy drafts. We'll have to see how he kind of fits in the offense because he's an outside wide receiver, but they kind of needed a slot guy. So who knows? Maybe Smith could move in more often, or maybe I don't know. I don't know yet. I'm gonna give it a C plus as well, maybe a C, maybe a C, just because we saw. I mean, Parker obviously has fallen off since his time in
yeah.
Miami and maybe those early years in New England. So it's solid, but not something I could spend too much time on thinking about it. I think he will go undrafted in most
Oh
10
yeah.
team drafts.
Yeah, Devontae Parker is going to have a resurrection year, Justin. I believe
Oh, okay.
he's an upgrade over Zacchaeus and Julio Jones, who I don't think we'll probably see again, who's a legend in this league. But, Devontae Parker, he's been quiet for the past 2 to 3 years. You mentioned he was really good in Miami. New England with Belichick and Mac Jones, they're never really interesting. They never really made anything crazy, dynamic happen on offense when you have like Bill O'Brien and like Patricia and all them, calling play calls. And so, I think now he has a fresh start, a resurrection. You know how much I love Jalen Hurts. He's going to get I think Jalen Hurts is going to get the ball to this guy. He's going to be a very sneaky pick, not getting drafted. He's going to be a very cheap guy on all DraftKings slates, a guy that you can plug in for under 3,500. He's going to be a very sneaky guy. Look out for Devontae Parker. He's going to be a waiver wire pickup, I would say, around week 4, week 5, week 6, Justin. I
Yeah.
think like the Eagles are going to get a ton of shootouts. He's going to be that third guy, that like Tyler Boyd, that like really gritty Tyler Boyd type role.
Yeah.
So I like it. I'm gonna give it a C minus just because we haven't heard from Devontae Parker in like 2 to 3 years. But he has an upgraded offense, and hey, we love Philly going into next year.
Yeah. Yeah. That wraps up wide receivers. Obviously, Parker has the opportunity to do something more with his career that we haven't seen
Yeah,
in recent years. But yeah, all right, moving on to quarterbacks. To me, there's two that have kind of immediate relevance, of course. And then I'll throw out a lot of these backup mentions because last year I think we saw over the past 2 years we've seen the most backup starting football games just because of quarterback injuries and
yeah,
bad play. And so I think it's important to bring up some of these backup quarterbacks. But yeah, let's dive into of course, the starters first. A guy that we just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, Kirk Cousins signs with Atlanta, and I couldn't be more happy about the signing that they make. Obviously, I wouldn't argue that they're just a quarterback away from being a Super Bowl contender, but definitely are in the driver's seat of their division. And I think they could win 11, 12 games
yeah,
if their schedule kind of pans out well. Kirk's got everybody he would like. Drake London, Bijan, Kyle Pitts, the two new wide receivers, Mooney and Rondale, and then a pretty good defense, I'd say. Better than the one he had in Minnesota. So I'm a big fan of it. I give it an A. The deal, obviously, he's getting 100 million guaranteed, 4 years, 180. Hopefully, I think the one concern you might have is maybe the cap that he hasn't, been super far in the playoffs in his career. But
yeah.
obviously, he was having a great year before getting injured, and then the fact that he got the ACL injury. If you're worried about that, that could be a cause for concern, but I'm not too worried about it because he had it in week 6 or 7 maybe. So I'm a big fan of it. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, look, Kirk Cousins is one of those sneaky underrated quarterbacks, but hey, he knows how to get the ball out to his players. He's never been the guy that's gotten his team deep into the playoffs. I think you can blame that. Hey, Minnesota just wasn't built that way. He's won a playoff game. He's done his fair share in this league. He's not a guy that I'm nervous about, like how I am with Baker Mayfield or like a Jameis Winston. But I do feel like with Kirk Cousins, he's going to be good with this team. He's going to be the guy that's going to hand it off to, Bijan. He doesn't have a guy like Justin Jefferson anymore or Diggs to throw it to, but he has, some good guys. He also doesn't have a prime Adam Thielen, but he does have guys to get the ball to. We do think we got to believe that Drake London breakout season has to be coming. He's had great games in this past year, some flashes. You got to believe that with Kyle Pitts, he's never really had the quarterback. Matt Ryan was able to get the ball to him in his first couple years in the league. But Kirk Cousins is more of a heavy passer. There's two concerns that I have, Justin, is how healthy Kirk will be going into next year. He did tear his ACL in the middle of the season. And you also got to think about the cap space too, Justin. They paid a lot for this guy. You do want to use some of that money to build on your defense, Justin, because in that, division with the Saints, pretty strong defense, and in the Tampa Bay defense, who's pretty stout. Carolina, they got rid of some key pieces. I'm not really sure what there'll be, but I like Kirk Cousins. It's pretty interesting, Justin. If you can draft a team, right, from rounds 1 to like 8 with running backs, receivers, maybe get your Laporta in the second or third round, get a running backs receiver, you can get a guy like Kirk Cousins maybe in the 9th, 10th round, Justin. He could fall that deep because there's so many good quarterbacks. As we're about to, talk about that Pittsburgh situation, this guy, he's going to be very underrated. A guy that matchup based for sure. Kirk Cousins, if he's home versus a weak team like Carolina, who's in that division, maybe if they play a team like Cincinnati, that could be a shootout in that dome in Atlanta where you never have to worry about the weather. Kirk Cousins is going to be a pretty good quarterback. And Justin, may I say, he's going to fall under our league winners, Justin, that late in the year, the Falcons are going to be pushing for the playoffs. They're going to be competing with New Orleans and Tampa Bay. And maybe if Carolina can be good, this is going to be a push for a sense of urgency for Kirk Cousins. And it's going to be very interesting to see what they do. If they can add some pieces in the draft on their offense, this is going to be a very sneaky quarterback that could be really good.
Yeah, and I kind of hold him in that he's a low-end quarterback one.
Yeah.
I would be comfortable with him as my quarterback one. I feel like a lot of people might kind of have him in the same range as Aaron Rodgers heading into next year.
Ooh,
I'd
yeah.
have Kirk over Aaron Rodgers in my opinion.
Ooh, yeah.
Just because I kind of I like the coaching better. But
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of about it there. But I like him a lot. I think the 10th round, maybe 11th round could be good for him. Even 9th round, he'll go in that range, and you'll be happy with it. Especially if that's your plan. I know a lot of people's strategy is kind of wait on a quarterback. He might be the perfect wait on a quarterback play there. So yeah, Kirk Cousins there. And then the last one, it's got obviously two names that are thrown into the basket here. Russell Wilson signs with them right before free agency starts. I like it. I like it a good amount. Obviously, it's an upgrade from Kenny Pickett. And then obviously they traded for Justin Fields a handful of days ago, which you're like, wow, so they're going to start Fields? No, obviously they said he was told that he will be the backup heading into the season, that it's going to be Russell's job to start, which is fine. I don't know how the season's going to pan out for them. I'm uncertain there just because I think Russell is good enough not to get benched, even though he did get benched in Denver. But with Fields, I think Fields is overall a better quarterback. Obviously, he's younger.
Yeah.
Will he get the opportunity? We will see. Obviously, they don't have Diontae Johnson anymore. I think it's about time they bring in another wide receiver. If they don't, actually, I might be a little worried just because it's only George Pickens and Freiermuth.
Yeah.
Calvin Austin, I think, is their next wide receiver, and that's not good. They cut Allen Robinson, so
Yeah.
it'll come down to a lot of things. I'm gonna give the Fields one. Actually, I'm gonna give both of them a B plus, just because of the deals they made to get them there, and how this quarterback room is absolutely transformed from Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph, and Mitch Trubisky to Russell Wilson and Fields is worlds better than what they had, like better than that grouping. And they didn't give up a lot. I mean, they're paying Russell $1 million, 1.2 mil, and they traded a 6th that could be a 4th for Fields when there were talks Fields could go for a 2nd. So I'm a fan of the moves. Obviously, heading into the year, the fantasy aspect of it, I'd rather have Fields as the fantasy quarterback just because of his rushing abilities. But obviously, it's going to be Russ to start the year, so we will see. Let me get your thoughts because I think it's a lot to go over.
Yeah, I have a lot to say on this, Justin. It's probably the most I'll say with these quarterbacks. Here's the thing, okay. I am still a believer in Russell Wilson. I do think the situation he was in Denver was just, I don't think anybody could have been good in that
Yeah,
situation. Here's the thing. I would have liked to seen, first of all, in Pittsburgh not get rid of Diontae Johnson, because I feel like
yeah,
Russell Wilson would have been good with both Diontae Johnson and George Pickens, as well as Fields. Um, and with Russell Wilson, I feel like he is a guy that gets hot later in the year. I feel like, in Denver, he sort of got into this groove. I remember in the middle part of the season, Denver did win a couple games. I
yeah,
think they had a good key win against Kansas City. They had that Monday night, late comeback from behind against Buffalo. And so, I would like to see Russell just do his thing through the year. However, if he has a couple bad games, Justin, everybody in the steel curtain in Pittsburgh is going to be chanting for Fields, who has a better rushing upside, Justin. He's been so great rushing the football. I, I just wish Russell could get his opportunity. But when we talked about Fields potentially going to Pittsburgh a couple of weeks ago, we loved the idea. So I'm going to stick with that. As far as grading him, Russell is a B minus. Justin Fields is an A minus because Justin Fields has only been in the league for like 2 to 3 years. He has a future in that league. I think that Russell is only going to be a 1 year guy, bridge guy, and I would have liked to seen Russell go to Minnesota. He has
yeah.
that deep ball potential to get to Jefferson and to Jordan Addison. So I feel like that's a big miss. I feel like Pittsburgh should have went all out for Justin Fields, made him their starter, make him feel comfortable. He just came out of a pretty bad situation in Chicago. I would have liked to see Fields surely have his own team. It's going to be very tricky now, Justin. Now we can't draft either of these guys. We could, we can't. Who knows how we're going to approach this? I mean, it's these guys are now kind of undraftable because this is not like a running back situation or a wide receiver situation where it's like, oh, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins or Waddle and Tyreek Hill. One of them can have good weeks. They can both have, but it's quarterback is one position unless you're like the Jets when you're throwing in Mark Sanchez and Tim Tebow, every other play. So it's very tricky to see how it's going to happen. If Russell struggles 1 or 2 games in a row, the media is going to be calling for Fields and even
Yeah.
vice versa. So, I feel bad for both these quarterbacks. I do think Fields is the future. Once, next year, this is, in 2025, this is his team. He's going to be a quarterback to draft very, very relatively early, fifth or sixth rounds for quarterback. But now, Justin, you can't draft these quarterbacks. I mean, yeah, you can draft them 10th, 11th round and just you roll the dice and pray that one of them, but who knows? One of these quarterbacks are not going to finish the year, I feel like. And it's very, these are two good quarterbacks. One of them should be somewhere else in a team like, Minnesota. And I feel like one of them could have been good, but, it's going to get better though, but just not this season.
Yeah, I agree. In Pittsburgh mind, I would feel like I mean, obviously I feel like they're always kind of in a win now, but
Yeah.
why not give Fields the opportunity to see if he's your franchise guy? Which makes me think that he's got to get some playing time this year.
Yeah.
But I'm not drafting a backup in a fantasy football draft. So if Russ is starting week 1, I'm not drafting Fields, so he's not going to get
Mhm.
drafted. Some people might take a flyer on him, early in the waiver wires if Russ is struggling. For Pittsburgh, I like that they got new quarterbacks in there that are actually
Yeah.
good quarterbacks. But for fantasy, it kind of does nothing. And then the fact they got rid of Diontae really makes their fantasy outlook kind of dim.
Yeah.
Obviously, though, I'm a big fan of if you got rushing upside, you got fantasy value. That's why I hope Fields gets in at some point, and he could maybe down the stretch be a league winner if he comes
Yeah.
in at the right time and is the starter for those pivotal games because we know Pittsburgh's going to be in line to make the playoffs if they're always right in there. So yeah, that kind of ends the starting quarterback talk.
Yeah.
And I'm just gonna throw there's literally 8 guys, no more than that, like 12 guys
That we can
that are
just,
backups that I'm just
yeah.
gonna toss out to you. I'm just gonna name like 5, and then I'll name 5 more because I literally have a ton of them. All right, Sam Howell, he gets traded from Washington to Seattle. That's one guy. Desmond Ritter's involved in a trade. He gets dealt from Atlanta to Arizona. All right, next trade. My goodness. Mac Jones is from New England. He gets shipped to Jacksonville, his hometown. And then there's a couple signing. I think maybe the biggest signing that could have some value is Gardner Minshew. He is a Raider. Could be a bridge quarterback. Maybe they get a Penix or a Nix or something like that, and maybe they don't think Nix is the starter week 1 or whatever it could be, and they start Gardner for a handful of weeks and then put in their try out their new franchise guy. But he's the only one that I could see starting week 1. Maybe Jacoby Brissett too. He's in New England now. If they don't think Jaden or Drake May or JJ or whoever is ready. Sam Darnold's another name. Let me just toss out a couple more, and then if you remember all the names, I can remind you. But Drew Lock is in New York, is on the Giants now. Tyrod is with the Jets now. Marcus Mariota's with the Commanders. Joe Flacco is a Indianapolis Colt, and Jameis Winston, and Tyler Huntley are Browns. So yeah, give me your thoughts on any or all of them or whatever.
Out of all of them, Sam Howell has the potential to be a starter because he did pretty good in Washington. Remember, he led the league in passing yards up until week 14.
Okay.
And so now you go to Seattle, you have Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith and Jigba, a team that's on the upcome in Seattle. He, out of all these, has the best potential. Desmond Ridder trade, I didn't understand because you traded a wide receiver. You already have Kyler Murray there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's Desmond Ridder is a glorified Joshua Dobbs better. I don't know if he's better than Joshua Dobbs. It's in and out.
Yeah.
Mac Jones, another trade I do not understand. You have a franchise quarterback in Mac Jones, or excuse me, Trevor Lawrence. But why bring in Mac Jones? He was picked so high. I think Justin, they were in the same draft, right? I think Trevor Lawrence was 1, and then Mac Jones was like 20th or something. 15, yeah 20. So I don't understand that at all. You guys should have made another trade to get Trevor Lawrence a receiver. Maybe trade for a guy like DeVante Parker or someone from New England. I don't know why you guys traded for Mac Jones. Joe Flacco is always going to be a good veteran guy in Indianapolis. You know, AR is hurt. Minshew is in Vegas. So, you know, Flacco, I feel like he can sling it. I feel like he was in a better system, though, in Cleveland. But we do love Shane Steichen in Indianapolis. So we feel like it's not far off. Both teams have elite running backs, Chubb, Taylor. So Winston, he's just going to be a backup. You know, Deshaun Watson is there. I don't think Winston has any success in Cleveland if Deshaun were to get hurt or benched or whatever it may be. Minshew, on the other hand, you know, Minshew's such a gritty quarterback that wherever he goes, he's going to have a chance to win a football game. You know, not saying Minshew is a great quarterback, but he's one of the better backups, kind of like not as good as a Fitzpatrick was in his day, Justin, but a guy that's going to be able to put you in a position to help you win the division or help you to win a pretty, you know, important football game. Never count out Minshew. Guys like Brissett, though, Drew Lock, Tyrod, you know, Tyrod Taylor is always injury prone. So is Mariota. Drew Lock, I was never high on, and Brissett, you know, it's impressive that he's still around ever since the retirement of Andrew Luck. So you know, these are just quarterbacks that will just be nothing but backups. We probably won't see them unless the starters are hurt.
Yeah, and I think last thing to kind of cover with those guys is the amount of injuries that we had to starting quarterbacks. Can they support those wide receivers or just the team in general?
Yeah.
I think the fact that the Jets have a capable backup now with Tyrod makes me less, worried if Rodgers were to go down again.
Yeah.
Same with the Vegas Raiders. If they decide to go, rookie, if that weren't, if he were to get injured or if Gardner starts the year, I think he could support Devontae Adams, in fantasy. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say also you named a good like Aaron Rodgers, but also throw Joe Burrow in there. You know he hasn't really been healthy all of his career. He missed his rookie year. He missed the better half of last season. So one of these quarterbacks like a Mac Jones could fit in, or Sam Howell, or maybe even like a Jameis Winston could fit in as a backup to Burrow just to keep the Bengals. Yeah. I know they have Jake Browning, who's pretty decent, but just Joe Burrow, another guy to keep out there.
Definitely. I think more and more now we're starting to realize how important backups are in the NFL. Yeah. What was that last guy? I was like, Drew Lock. If they just stick with Daniel Jones and Drew Lock, and Daniel Jones struggles, Drew Lock could become the starter, which is not super exciting, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then with Flacco, AR, as you mentioned, he has already an injury past.
Yeah.
3 different injuries last year. Obviously, one that ended his year pretty early. If he were to get injured again, I think
Hmm.
Flacco could support a Pittman. So,
Yeah.
yeah, all those backups moving around more than usual, I'd say, in this offseason. But I like most of them. They're all fine. Obviously, not super, not
Yeah.
fantasy relevant, but could become fantasy relevant. That's why we got to talk about it on the Dwayne Sports podcast. But yeah, that wraps up our episode. We just hit an hour, which is awesome. And so next episode, which will be next week, will be fantasy free agency winners and losers. We're gonna go by team now,
Yep.
instead of individual players, which obviously individuals will be included, but teams like the Cowboys and the Tech. I don't want to spoil too much, but
Yeah. Very
excited about
in-depth
that.
episode.
And obviously, I know how we're mainly a fantasy football podcast, but March Madness is underway very shortly. Might have to send out my bracket, get that out there just to share with you guys. If you guys need the help or you guys need to compare with us, obviously that's super fun. So thanks, Dwayne Nation, for tuning into another episode, and we will see you next week. Genoa, peace.
Peace, brother.